Well, welcome, listeners, to this episode of Godspeed Wyoming. Today, I have with me Liz Cassidy, the Executive Director of the Sheridan YMCA. So thank you, Liz. Thank you for saying yes. Thank you for being here today. I'm so happy that you're here.
Well, thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. So part of this podcast is I ask for people to give me recommendations of people that are bringing light into our community or just making a difference or overcoming things. And you were highly recommended. She's already tearing up. For those of you that can't see her, I know our listeners can't see her, but she brings a beautiful light to our community. She has a beautiful smile. She's such a humble leader. When I asked her to come and be on this podcast, she's like, "What? Me? Really?" So many people see you as bringing the light to our community. Just a wonderful leader, especially for those younger leaders that take on new roles and what you've been able to do with the Y, which I would love to expand, which I'm going to expand a little bit later in this podcast. So if those of you that are younger leaders and want to take on new roles, or this is the courageous person and the podcast that you want to listen to, and for any of you that are just taking on new leaps, and Liz will be a great person to help guide you. So no tears. Liz, as I said, Liz is kind of tearing up a little bit, but I just love your passion. And again, thank you for being here. For those of you that do not know Liz, she has been with the YMCA for 17 years, and 7 of those as the executive director. I cannot believe I remember when you took on that role. I can't believe it's been 7 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you've led through a pandemic, and a lot has happened in those 7 years. Right?
Yeah, they've been eventful.
To say the least. It's been amazing. She grew up on a ranch south of Campbell County, surrounded by a wonderful extended family. And she has 2 daughters, who I'm sure are going to be listening to this podcast, right?
Yes.
Let's say hello to them. So what are your daughters' names?
So Delilah and Addison Ruth. So
all right.
Yeah.
Delilah and Addison, hello.
Hello.
We're so proud of your mom. She's doing a great job, and your wonderful husband, and just a great, amazing family. So thank you so much. And as you have said, in your bio, that you just love empowering young people and creating opportunities for growth and development, which you're definitely doing at the Y. But as I was saying earlier, I've just been so inspired by your leadership within the community, and just, your youth and being a young leader and just being so inspirational to so many of us. So this podcast will be a lot of questions around that, if you don't mind. I want to deep dive into some of that.
Sure.
So, let's get started. So have you always seen yourself as a leader? Have you always wanted to be a leader? Was there like a light bulb moment where you're like, yes, I want to do that?
So, I came from a very large family. Where I went to school was 30 miles south of Gillette, and almost every kid who went to that school was of some relation to me. So there was, I think at most 36 kids, and there's some way that's your second cousin or first cousin. And I'm third of 4 kiddos in my family. And so you're just one of many. And yet, even from a young age, my mom was like, I don't know what to do with you, because, just bossy. And, I'd create these clubs at school and have everyone pay dues. And then I'd create a new club. And it was just very much, I wanted to organize people, and I wanted, probably being part of a large family where I had that older sister who was more the alpha. When I went to school, I always wanted to be in charge. And I think, when you're the little one in a family, you want that. And so it just seemed to be every step of the way. I found myself in those roles, I worked in a theater in the summers and became the production stage manager at 20 years old. And so had to have, hard performance management conversations as a young person. And even when I was like, I don't want to be in charge, different points in your life where you don't want the responsibility, I seem to always gravitate back to those roles, especially if they're not being filled.
Mm-hmm. So just backing up, I have lots of questions related to that, but just being a young person in leadership, like you said, 20 years old, you're in a leadership role. Like, how did you, I'm sure you're supervising people that are older than you.
Right.
So how do you feel like you bring them on board or buy into what you're trying to do, being the younger one in the room?
Sure. And I think, I don't think I've figured it out. And that's been kind of a theme in my leadership too. It's a little like becoming a parent. Part of the reason you agree to become a parent is you don't know. Part of being a leader is you don't know exactly what that job's going to entail. And every time you think you've got it figured out, you find out, oh, I have more to learn. I don't have it figured out. And especially leading those who might be older or have more experience with something, you really have to prove with your actions. There's not enough words in the dictionary to gain someone's respect. And so you have to put in that sweat equity. You have to come alongside, and you have to give them good whys behind your decisions. Because if you don't feel comfortable enough to articulate it to someone else, it's probably not a well thought out decision.
Absolutely. Very, very good point.
Yeah.
And with that conversation, that kind of leads me to the next question. Many people that live in Sheridan, Wyoming, know your predecessor. So
yeah.
Jay was wonderful and very involved in the community and was at the Y for years. And then here you come, slipping in with that and taking that big leadership role. So talk to me about how you felt through that time and how you kind of decided and prepared yourself to kind of follow in a legacy. Like, I think when I think about Jay, I think legacy.
Absolutely.
And so being a new young leader, how do you follow in those type of footsteps?
Right. I think Jay was so incredible and just lived and breathed the Y mission, that getting to work for him for 10 years and him develop that filter around the mission in the way that I led, made it easier. And at the same time, you're not a replacement. And if you try to emulate, a very unique and special personality, you'll just fall on your face, because there's no replacing someone like Jay in terms of that institutional knowledge and that approach. It's unique to him and it worked for him. And so while I think I got a little bit of a boost in having worked with Jay and understood how the community supported the mission because of the way he made it come alive, I also then had to take that and realize, that worked for him in his gender and his age and all those pieces that, those dynamics that make up a leader that, I joke, Jay had it figured out. He didn't have a computer. And I was like, what?
I would love not to have a computer.
Well, that's what I discovered.
I'm going to throw mine in the trash. If that's what made him successful, I'm done.
So I'd asked for a computer when I took on the job. And then I was like, maybe I shouldn't have. There was just those things, and to realize that even if I tried to just recreate Jay's legacy, the why wasn't the why he had. Our community continues to evolve, the needs of our community. As I was sharing earlier, our why has expanded exponentially. The building itself is almost 35% larger than it was before. It has been 7 years of construction to remodel the entire original facility. And with that, we have over 2,000 more members. We have doubled the staff. So some of those things, like when I came on at the Y, we could write out our timesheets. And, and my issues were telling 16-year-old staff, you can't use a crayon on your timesheet. And now, we just had to embrace technology in a way that the YMCA of, the 90s and even the 2000s were able to keep that traditional model that, especially post-COVID, members want an app that shows them where their schedule is. And staff need to clock in on their phones and all these pieces that if I tried to just duplicate that leadership and that vision. It wouldn't fit with today's needs.
Absolutely. And just backing up a second, I think what I heard in all of that, and I think it would be important for the listeners to hear, is just be authentic to your true self. All of us are different, and that's why we're put in those roles. Like, there was obviously people seeing something very special in you, and so they didn't expect you to be Jay. And so I think this is a great example with everything that you've done in these 7 years with your team and the support of your team, that it just shows that being your true authentic self, you'll be successful. Just stay true to that.
Yeah.
So thank you for staying true to that, and getting a computer.
And getting a computer.
And getting a computer. And
and it's interesting too, because sometimes, I took on the role. So I was 32, and a member asked me right away, like, just came into my office, and it was really abrupt. She goes, "How old are you?" And I thought, oh gosh, this isn't going to go well. And I said, I'm 32. And she said, good, because we expect 40 years. Like, that's what Jay has done. And so it's just interesting too, in terms of what you can build up in your head as, imposter, or I don't know, all of your internal conversations, and which ones you just need to combat so that you can, lead and not just doubt yourself constantly.
Putting that aside. So that leads me to my next question. Then we're talking about leadership and leading and your authentic type of leadership. So can you share with us some practices you utilize kind of personally that help you stay on your game, and then some practices you utilize with your team?
Yeah. So a couple things that I utilize. One is I have a really great kind of organically grown group of female professionals that we meet every other week for breakfast. We call ourselves GLOW, and depending on who you ask, they have a different interpretation of what that stands for. Sometimes it's gorgeous ladies of Wyoming, or of wisdom, or leaders of, we've got lots of gal leaders of Wyoming, but just leaders that don't have a stake in your industry, that can give you that feedback, that can help you process things, and just that safe space to just know, we all have blinders, and we all have things we're not seeing. And so to have that group help me vet just ideas or thoughts or, frustrations has been a really great practice. In that same way, I have been able to have some great coaching from different community leaders, and one specifically really encouraging me to just journal once a week, find some time in my schedule that is just set aside, to strategize the next week, but also identify those things, not just the things I'm grateful for and the positive pieces, but just to be frank with myself, like, what are my risks and liabilities, both as a team or a department, things that that I don't realize are bothering me a lot until I wake up in the middle of the night and realize they're heavy on my heart. To just put them on paper. And then the liabilities for myself, what things are creeping up? Where am I, maybe getting too emotionally attached to this idea or to this thing, and it's limiting my leadership. And just walking through that, and then what am I doing really well? And what is going really well with a team or a department at the Y, and how do I encourage that? And so it's both acknowledging the things that if I try to push aside will crop up, and then also just really identifying the things I want to feed more of.
It's so important.
Yeah.
I think we get so busy. I think reflection time, no matter what it looks like, whether you journal or whether you meditate or whatever, we spend time in prayer, whatever it is, taking that time to just stop and think
Right.
and process. So it's interesting. So many successful leaders, they have that practice time. So I'm so
Right.
encouraged to hear that you do the same. It's just so important. So I think for listeners, a great takeaway would, no matter where you are in your journey, whether you're a CEO or executive director or, you're frontline staff, I think for any of us, or a stay-at-home mom, I think anybody just leading, whether you're in the home or outside of the home, just be able to take that time to reflect. And I love what you said about liabilities. I've never thought of it that way, but that's a powerful word. Like, what are the liabilities in our life that could negatively impact us? I'm going to add that to my journal time because I never look at it that way. But it could, before you know it, something can start to spiral down in a negative way.
And with that vulnerability piece too, and I do think a lot about becoming a new mom and it being very closely aligned with how I felt being a new leader. But all the things you don't know and that you'll never always figure out. And I've really found just recently, so this isn't something I've nailed down historically, but both in my prayer, but also in my communication is kind of the I don't know statement. And so I'm raised and am a Catholic. And so I joke sometimes freelance prayer is not my strong suit. But I had saw somewhere the format of an I don't know prayer where you just start a dialogue with God in terms of, I don't know. And you just list all the things you don't know. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do about this. And I don't know how to solve this. And I don't know if I'm good enough for this. And I don't know. And I just use it like a laundry list of everything that's on my heart that I just don't know. And then I say at the end, but you do. And there is something really like profoundly releasing about that. And then at work, I recently received, and it was like serendipitous because this is just something I pray, the phrase to tell people, I don't know, like when your team comes to you and you're like, so what's the answer to this? And sometimes I don't have that answer, but to be able to say, I don't know, but let's think together and make that the initial, so it's not like, I don't know, which gives no one faith, but not fake it.
Right.
But be open in terms of, I don't know, but let's think through it together and we'll get there. And it's released a lot of pressure from me to think that I have to know the answer. And if I don't, I better think really fast on my feet to give them the answer.
I think our staff knows when we're faking it.
Yes.
And, there's something so wonderful and beautiful about transparency. I think when people just know that you're being honest and genuine and you don't know, but then you get their buy-in and say, help me get there.
Right.
I always see that people are so appreciative of that and just willing to help. I think genuinely our teams are willing to help us and don't expect us to always be that leader that knows everything.
Yeah.
That's a great
No, and that's taken a long time for me to, and probably getting out of that, fake it till you make it stage of leadership and into the, well, there's no way you can know all the answers. And if you think you do, you probably have a blind spot. Right.
And with your team, is there anything, I love what you just said about working with your team and being open and honest. Are there other strategies with your team that you utilize?
Something, and this isn't even specific to me, but at the Y, they have it's called Listen First. And so it's used in a lot of different ways. And it's primarily like asking those open-ended questions and then, reflecting back. And so you do it, like if someone comes in to use the Y for the first time and they want a tour, instead of showing them every nook and cranny of our 100,000 square foot building, to just ask, those open-ended, what are you looking for? What is your, and to reflect back and to make sure, we're meeting people where they're at. And in our leadership team, when we're at our best is we're practicing that skill a lot. So it's reflecting back instead of just responding. It's, so what I hear is, and the amount of times that is like, oh, no, that's not what I meant. And that you can correct the those communication gaps that if you didn't have that chance to reflect back on what someone's saying, could really get lost in translation and cause all sorts of, team divisions and things like that, because the why is a huge beast in terms of so many tiny threads of communication all day long. And so making sure we ask those reflecting, clarifying questions, and those pieces have become so crucial to our work as we've expanded, and help me understand, instead of making assumptions of the other person's intent, that's a phrase that we use a lot at the Y. Help me understand, how you got here, what framed this decision. And that changes a lot of things in terms of making sure we assume positive intent.
Absolutely. And just opening the door for all sorts of communication, which is definitely the key.
Yeah.
For all of us.
Yeah, we're in human work. I mean, the building is great, but it's only as great as the humans inside of it. And human work is messy,
It's very messy.
Yeah.
But you all are doing an amazing job.
Oh.
Just an amazing job. As we kind of start to wrap up here a little bit, do you have any advice for someone like yourself? Because you've been through this, so it's always great to see you as a mentor. Or do you have any advice for someone who's starting maybe a new leadership role, or just starting something in general, something new? Like you were saying, just being authentic and like what you did. Do you have any advice for those listeners out there that are starting something new?
Part of it is, I was thinking about this question in terms of maybe you're not in a leadership role, but you want to be considered, is just asking to be invited to the table, and not saying, I want this promotion right away, but asking can I attend the meetings? Can I, make myself better informed? And I have a really great friend who lives in Colorado, and she used to be up here as an AmeriCorps. And she told me the one thing I learned from AmeriCorps is when I move to a town, the first thing I do before I apply for jobs is I just start volunteering. Oh. And when I volunteer, everything falls into place. People are able to get to know you in that way. She's like, I've had my best job offers when I'm volunteering somewhere. She was like, moved home. I volunteered at the library, and I became a PE teacher. She was really interested in this advancement into kind of an adaptive PE supervisory role. And she goes, so I just asked, can I come to those meetings to learn more? And it allows you to come in as an informed candidate, that they don't have to worry that once you get an idea of what this job really entails, you're going to bail. Because those selecting leaders are also scared. Does this person, are they in it for the title? Are they in it for the perceived power? Or are they in it for the right reasons? Because leadership is hard, and it comes with a lot of heartache and a lot of, at the end of the day, accountability. And when you get to be invited to the table, and just being willing to say that, as a female, I often have found myself growing up being like, well, if you just work hard enough, someone will notice and invite you. But to not assume that that's what you're interested in or any of those things, you got to speak up and ask if you can be invited. And the same, starting any new role, put yourself in positions to be seen, to be at the table. And generally people are pretty receptive to that. And then the first time it gets hard, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I see this so much as we give folks new supervisory roles, and they realize the first time a staffing situation goes wrong or a project doesn't turn out, and they're like, maybe I wasn't made for this. And to just know, you have to have that at the beginning, and almost to tell people oh, we've checked that box off. Congratulations. You had your first hitting of the wall. And to know that something new, it's good because it's hard.
Absolutely.
And that's a good thing.
Yeah, just backing up to what you were saying. I loved what you said about volunteering, because you can really do that at any age.
Yeah.
If you're, in high school, or at any age, you can start volunteering and you start experiencing, I like this, I don't like that. And all the way up until you're retired. At any age, you can start volunteering. It doesn't mean that you have to wait till you're 21 or 25, or you have that degree, or you have, so that is a beautiful way to get into, to jump into something new. And then I think just being okay with failure, the second part of what you were saying, you need to fail so that way you learn from it. And so just remembering that. And so those are just really excellent points, I think, for our listeners to, I hope they have pens out there and they're writing this down, because this is very good stuff.
And it's interesting because it's not overnight stuff too. And so I think I voiced my intention to look at a leadership role at the Y when Jay started talking about retirement. And so I just asked if I could come to committee meetings and board meetings. And I did it for 2 years. Jay had big projects to finish up. And I was so thankful that he just was so open to myself and to other staff, like, come, learn, and that wasn't well, if I go to a couple meetings, they're going to see me and I can check that box. And then I can that leadership is a slow road. And especially if you want it to stick. And I'm really thankful that I was given the opportunity to just explore those things for a long time before I had to sit in the seat. And just I keep going back to having kiddos, that I thought I checked all the boxes. I waited till I was 27. My husband and I both had full-time stable jobs. I worked at the Y. What a great place to raise kids. And then as soon as I brought that baby home, I thought, I'm too young. I'm not ready for this. And that was my first week in this role. I was like, I'm too young. I'm not ready for this. And that you'll never be ready, but you can do all those preparatory steps and then jump.
Yeah. I love that. So I think our message is jump.
Yeah.
That is just a great way to wrap this up. So if you're looking at doing something new, just take that leap, just like Liz did, and don't be afraid and do your research, but don't overthink it. Sometimes you just have to jump.
You'll never get it figured out.
It's just so great. Well, thank you so much, Liz, for being here. I think our listeners are just going to learn so much from the episode today. So thank you. And just thank you for being so honest and vulnerable. I think sometimes, it's hard to say, this is what I'm experiencing, but that's the only way others learn. So thank you for being so honest and sharing all of your wonderful insights. And thank you, listeners, for joining us on this episode of Godspeed Wyoming. As we always say at the end of this program, if you know anyone that is shining the light, just like Liz here today, please email me and share with their contact information at godspeedwyoming@gmail.com. And again, thank you for being here and listening. If you like this episode, please let us know, and please share. We're hoping that you will share and just continue to follow Godspeed Wyoming. So this is Jen Crouse signing off, and Godspeed Wyoming.